Jai Hind, everyone. Let's continue with the part two of Bricks, Beats, and Bones, which is the first chapter in Themes in Indian History, part one. So, in the last video, we have completed the first 4 pages, and now we are starting with Mohenjo-daro, a planned urban center. So, let's get started. Perhaps the most unique feature of the Harappan civilization was the development of urban centers. Let us look at one such center, that is Mohenjo-daro, more closely. Although Mohenjo-daro is the most well-known site, the first site to be discovered was Harappa. So, in the Indus Valley civilization, Mohenjo-daro is the most well-known site, but the first site to be discovered was Harappa. In Mohenjo-daro, the settlement is divided into two sections. So, the settlement is divided into two sections. One which is smaller but higher, and the other much larger but lower. So, in this, one is smaller but higher, and the second one is larger but lower. Archaeologists Archaeologists designate these as the citadel and lower town. So the first one, citadel, is smaller but higher part of the settlement, whereas the lower town is the larger but lower part of the settlement. The citadel owes its height to the fact that buildings were constructed on mud brick platforms. So the height of the citadel is because the buildings were constructed on mud brick platforms, and also the citadel was walled, which means it was physically separated from lower town. So the citadel was walled, which means that it was physically separated from the lower town, but the lower town is also walled. So we can say that the two parts of the settlement, that are citadel and lower town, were walled separately. Several buildings were built on platforms which served as foundations. It has been calculated that if one laborer moved roughly a cubic meter of earth daily just to put the foundations in place, it would have required 4 million person days, in other words, mobilizing labor on a very large scale. Consider something else. Once the platforms were in place, all the building activity within city was restricted to a fixed area of platform. So, how was if you see the settlement here, although it is the lower town, this is all the lower town, but we can see there is a fixed area for settlements here and here. So that means it seems that the settlement was first planned and then implemented. So what can we conclude from the building activity that can be seen in the city? That the settlement was first planned and then implemented accordingly. Other signs of planning include bricks, which whether sun-dried or baked or of standardized ratio. So all the bricks that were used in the construction in the settlement were either sun-dried or baked, and they were of standardized ratio. What is that ratio? The length and breadth were 4 times and twice the height. So if the height is 1, the breadth will be 2 and the length will be 4. So this is the standardized ratio of the bricks that were used at all Harappan settlements. Not only in Mohenjo-daro, these standardized ratio of bricks were used in all Harappan settlements. Let's see this box. Although Harappa was the first site to be discovered, it was badly destroyed by brick robbers. So how was the Harappa destroyed? It was destroyed by brick robbers. As early as 1875, Alexander Cunningham, who is Alexander Cunningham? He is the first Director General of Archaeological Survey of India, and he is also called what? He is called Father of Indian Archaeology. He noted that the amount of brick taken from ancient site was enough to lay bricks for about 100 miles of railway between Lahore and Multan. What is being said here, that if we collect all the bricks and are laid, so that we can lay 100 miles of railway line between Lahore and Multan. Thus, many of the ancient structures at the site were damaged. In contrast, Mohenjo-daro was far better preserved. So from this, we can conclude the two main points. That is, in 1875, Alexander Cunningham. Who is Alexander Cunningham? He is the first Director General of Archaeological Survey, and he is also called as Father of Indian Archaeology. The next topic is laying out drains. So in the settlement, first one is completed, that is names of parts of settlement and also about bricks, and the next one is drains. One of the most distinctive features of Harappan cities was the carefully planned drainage system. If you look at the plan of Lower Town, you will notice that the roads and streets were laid out along an approximate grid pattern intersecting at right angles. Here, if we see, all the streets and roads are intersecting at each other at right angles, at approximate right angles. It seems that streets with drains were laid out first and then houses built along with them. So what happened? First streets were laid out and along the streets were the houses being built. If domestic wastewater had to flow into the street drains, every house needed to have at least one wall along a street. So if the domestic drain water, the wastewater from the house had to enter the street drains, so then what is the condition? Then every house needed to have at least one wall along a street. Now in citadels, while most Harappan settlements have a small high western part, so which is the western parts? Which is the western part? That is citadel. And a larger lower eastern section, there are variations. At sites such as Dholavira and Lothal, the entire settlement was fortified. So what is the difference? At Dholavira and Lothal, the entire settlement was fortified and sections within the town were also fortified. What does it mean? So if it is the settlement of Dholavira and Lothal, and this is the citadel part, this is separately walled, this is separately walled, and the entire settlement is also walled or fortified. But the citadel within Lothal was not walled off, but was built at a height. So what happened at Lothal? This citadel was not walled. So that is the difference. So we can say that all the Harappan settlements, the citadel was walled off except in Lothal. The next one is domestic architecture. The lower town at Mohenjo-daro provides examples of residential buildings. Many were centered on a courtyard with rooms on all sides. So if it is the courtyard, and along this will be the rooms. The courtyard will be the center for activities such as weaving, cooking, particularly during and hot weather. What is also interesting is an apparent concern for privacy. How is the issue of privacy taken care in the Mohenjo-daro Harappan settlements? That is, there are no windows in the walls along the ground level. Besides, the main entrance doesn't give a direct view of the interior or the courtyard. So how is the privacy issue has been taken care of? So first of all, at the ground level, there are no windows in the walls. And the second thing, from the main entrance, there won't be any view of the interior or the courtyard. Next, every house had its own bathroom paved with bricks, and with drains connected through the wall to the street drains. So every house had its own bathroom paved with bricks and with the drains connected through the wall to the street drains. Also, some houses have remains of staircases. Not all, but some houses had staircases to reach a second story or the roof. Many houses had wells, often in a room that could be reached from the outside. So how is it important? Because these can be used by passers-by also, or by the people who are going through that road. It can be accessible to them also. So it is often a room that can be reached from the outside. Scholars have estimated that the total number of wells in Mohenjo-daro was about 700. So this is the layout of a normal house in Harappan settlements. So this is the main entrance. If we see here, there is no direct view of the courtyard. And here we have the staircases. About the drains, the most ancient system yet discovered. About the drains, Mackay noted, it is certainly the most complete ancient system as yet discovered. Every house was connected to the street drains. The main channels were made up of bricks and set in mortar and covered with loose bricks that could be removed for cleaning. So there was a regular cleaning of the bricks also that are used for draining. In some cases, limestone was used for the covers. House drains first emptied into a sump or cesspit into which solid matter settled while wastewater flowed out into the street drains. Very long drainage channels were provided at intervals with sumps for cleaning. So there was also a provision to keep the drains clean. It is a wonder of archaeology that little heaps of material, mostly sand, have frequently been found lying alongside drainage channels, which shows that debris was not always carted away when the drain was cleared. It is from Ernest Mackay, Early Indus Civilization, 1948. Drainage systems were not unique to the larger cities but were found in smaller settlements as well. In Lothal, houses were built of mud bricks, whereas drains were made up of burnt bricks. We also have learnt one exception for Lothal, that is the citadel was not walled off, and in Lothal the houses were built of mud bricks, whereas drains were made up of burnt bricks. So this is also another exception. Now, the citadel. Let's dive in details of the citadel. It is on the citadel that we find evidence of structures that were probably used for special public purposes. So we can find structures that are used for special public purposes in citadel. These include a massive structure with the lower brick portions remain, while the upper portions, probably of wood, decayed along a wall, that is the great bath. What is the great bath? It was a large rectangular tank in a courtyard surrounded by corridor on all four sides. There were two flights on the north and south leading to the tank. So here we can see the great bath. If we assume this is one flight of steps and this is the second flight of steps, one each in north and south direction, which was made watertight by setting bricks on edge and using a mortar of gypsum. There were rooms on three sides, in one of which was a large well. So to the three sides of the great bath, there were rooms, and we know in one of them was a large well. Water from the tank flowed into a huge drain. Across a lane to the north lay a smaller building with 8 bathrooms, 4 on each side of corridor, with drains from each bathroom connecting to a drain that ran along the corridor. The uniqueness of the structure as well as the context in which it was found has led scholars to suggest that it was meant for some kind of special ritual bath. So what is the overall layout of the great bath? The great bath was a large rectangular tank surrounded by corridor on all 4 sides, and it had 2 flight of steps, one on the northern side and the second one in south leading into the tank. And these steps were made with watertight. These were made watertight by setting bricks with mortar, and there were rooms on all 3 sides, and also in one of them was a large well, and then water from the tank flowed into a huge drain, and along the lane to the north there was a small building which had 8 bathrooms, 4 on each side of the corridor. So from this we can conclude that it was meant for some kind of special ritual bath. So this is the plan of the citadel. the next one is tracking social differences. So in any settlement, it is one of the things that archaeologists try to find, that is if there are any social differences among the people who are inhabitants of the Harappan settlements. So let's see one by one. So the first one is burials. Archaeologists generally use certain strategies to find out whether there are social or economic differences among the people living within a particular culture. These include studying burials. So you are probably familiar with the massive pyramids of Egypt, some of which are contemporaneous with Harappan civilization. Many of these pyramids were royal burials where enormous quantities of wealth was buried. At burials in Harappan sites, the dead were laid. At burials in Harappan sites, the dead were generally laid in pits. So how are the dead buried? Generally in pits. Sometimes there were differences in the way the burial pit was made. In some instances, the hollowed out spaces were lined with bricks. So if it is a burial, some are just normal burials, but some are embedded with bricks. So this is the basic difference. Could these variations be an indication of social differences? We are not sure. Some graves contain pottery and ornaments, perhaps indicating a belief that these could be used after life. So some of the graves, in some of the graves, we can find pottery and ornaments also, indicating a belief that these could be used in the afterlife. Jewelry has been found in burials of both men and women. In fact, in the excavations at the cemetery in Harappa in mid-1980s, an ornament consists of 3 shell rings were in Harappa. A jasper bead, a jasper means some kind of precious stone, a kind of semi-precious stone, and hundreds of micro beads were found near the skull of a male. In some instances, the dead were buried with copper mirrors. But on the whole, it appears that the Harappans did not believe in burying precious things with the dead. So what is the conclusion that is made with evidences? Harappans did not believe in burying precious things with the dead. The next one, looking for luxuries. Another strategy to identify social differences is to study artifacts, which archaeologists broadly classify as utilitarian and luxuries. So artifacts are of two types, that is, first one utilitarian, that can be used for daily use, and luxuries which require high skill to make them, or which is very hard to make. The first category include objects of daily use made fairly easily out of ordinary materials such as stone or clay. These include quants, as saddle quan, which we read earlier in the video, in the last video, and pottery, needles, flesh rubbers, etc., and usually found distributed throughout the settlement. So what are the two conditions to classify artifacts are utilitarian? They should be made easily and out of ordinary materials such as stone or clay. And if it is a utilitarian artifact, it would be found distributed throughout the settlements. Archaeologists assume objects were luxuries if they are rare and are made from costly non-local materials or with complicated technology. So what are the conditions to classify artifacts as luxuries? They should be made from costly or non-local materials, and also they can be made with complicated technology. Little pots of fanes. What is fanes? It is a material made up of ground sand or silica mixed with color and a gum and then fired. Then we get a material called fanes. Were probably considered precious because they were difficult to make. The situation becomes more complicated when we find what seem to be articles of daily use, such as spindle woods made up of raw materials such as fanes. Do we classify this utilitarian or luxuries? If we study the distribution of such arty crafts, we find that rare objects made up of valuable materials are generally concentrated in large settlements like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, and these are rarely found in smaller settlements. So, what is being told here? Such articrafts like that are made up of paints and everything. These are largely concentrated in large settlements like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, and these are rarely found in smaller settlements. For example, miniature pots of paints, perhaps used as perfume bottles, found mostly in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, and there are none from small settlements like Kalibangan. Gold, too, was rare and as at present probably precious. All the gold jewelry found at Harappan sites was recovered from hoards. So, what are these hoards? Hoards or object kept carefully by people, often inside containers such as pots. So these are objects that are carefully stored by people in some pots or boxes like that. Such hoards can be of jewelry or metal objects saved for reuse by metal workers. It is for some reason the original owners do not retrieve them. They remain where they are left till some archaeologist finds them. So these are hoards. Next, so what can we draw in social differences? The first one is burials, where Harappans did not believe in burying precious things with the dead, and in arty crafts, they have classified them into two, that is utilitarian and luxuries. And the next one is finding about craft production.